Counter-Narrative News wanted to bring you a commentary. It's been said that Malcolm X said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Now, it's difficult to find a source that confirms that this is correctly attributed to Malcolm X. But putting the authenticity of the quote aside for a second, it is quite an important concept that as humans with the ability to have consciousness and ability to reflect on ourselves and our relationships to other humans and the world and all living things, what do we actually stand for? Because if we're not conscious of what we actually stand for in quite an elaborate and thought out and reasoned fashion, then we can find ourselves somewhat unconsciously and unwittingly adopting ideas and ways of thinking and behavior that is not something that really we really wanted to. And in this era of hyper superficiality, narcissism, social fragmentation, the rise of far-right ideas becoming hegemonic and center ground, it's really important to engage in what is called in the Islamic framework the quote-unquote greater jihad, i.e. the internal work, and it's quite pertinent in this month of the holy month of Ramadan, in which Muslims are supposed to be guided and directed by the Most High and what Muslims consider the last prophet in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, to be instructed in this spiritual journey for a month not to eat from sunrise to sunset, not to eat or drink, and to reflect on our place and our spiritual relationship, of our relationship to ourselves as a reflection of our relationships to the universe and all living things. And really also, because you're not eating and drinking from sunrise to sunset, it's a form of solidarity with the oppressed and the poor and those that go hungry and that are barefooted. So applying that to today, when everything for decades now, arguably for a good part of half a century, is dragging everyone in a right-wing direction, which deepens oppressive frameworks of racism and misogyny and hatred for life and unity, what do you stand for? Do you think about this? How do you employ mechanisms to defend yourselves being influenced by the mainstreamed ideas that are impacting you and, for want of a better expression, hitting on you constantly through the means of social media and the devices that facilitate that? Where do you stand? What are your politics? What are your ethics? What are your principles? Do you have any? Do you think about this? How do you apply those things if you do think about this? Do you reflect on it deeply? Do you apply that to the way you actually interact with other human beings and living things? Are you vigilant to the more inhumane and anti-life concepts being directed upon you? Do you purge yourself from this? Do you defend yourself from this? It's really important, because I'm not trying to lecture people that you're so bad and I'm so great, because we're all impacted by this. We're all pressured by this in endless ways, constantly, all the time. I myself had to kind of really reflect, like, why have I suddenly taken the right-wing ideas on? Where has this come from? Especially in relation to global colonial and neo-colonial wars and the way that traumatizes people, the way that kind of offsets principles and human connections and concepts. I had to remind myself that I believe in the right of the poorest and the most oppressed in the world being empowered. And what does that empowerment mean? It means the ability to, in a growing unified sense with other members of the oppressed and poor classes, to be able to have some power over our lives. And what does that mean then? What does the empowerment mean? It means to have the ability to unite in a just way in accordance to other human beings and living things and nature, to be able to have nicer things from life to be enjoying, so as to have better, more healthier food, to organize the the organization of that food production and distribution in a more just way that raises oppressed people, that makes them less hungry, less able to access culture, sports, education, health, etc. That's what it means. And what are the obstacles to that? Capitalism. And what capitalism produces: racism, hatred for life, destruction of life, through war, injury, torture, death, and on a global level. It's really important that we constantly revisit things. Once reminded of one thing that Lenin said in the construction, early on in the construction of Russian socialism after the revolution of 1917. He argued that the old system of capitalism tries to reform itself constantly all the time within the new radical revolutionary state of socialism, and that people have to be vigilant to that, and there has to be societal movements to kind of defend that. Also, Marx says something interesting, to paraphrase. He said that all previous generations weigh down like a nightmare on those that live today, i.e. the forces of basically fascism and the far right, the forces of capitalist reaction and feudal reaction are constantly bearing down themselves in endless ways on humans that exist today. And so that's where you have, born out of the 1960s, the most radical concepts to actually defend ourselves from this insidious infiltration of counter-revolutionary, inhumane ideas and consciousness. So that's why Che Guevara argues for the new human. That's why the whole generation, Fanon, Che Guevara, Black Panther, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, Abdurrahman Babu, Malcolm X, Leila Khalid, I mean, the entire generation of revolutionaries of that time are very much arguing that we need to create a new consciousness, and that has to be predicated on the never-ending revolutionary processes of the most poorest and oppressed in the world. It's really fascinating. So just wanted to share this kind of philosophical and spiritual advocacy and framework. Be aware, be very vigilant as to what's happening. And it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing at all. One can see quite seasoned and veteran people who were active in the revolutionary struggle in the 1960s having no leadership today, because there is no leadership today on the planet for these ideas. There is no socialist leadership. There is no anti-colonial leadership for the oppressed. It doesn't exist. It's been destroyed. And in the context of no one holding your hand, figure of speech, metaphorically, no one guiding you, no one leading you in this way like there was in the 60s. You have to be your own leadership. Or you have to, in the frameworks of some mental health frameworks, be your own inner parent, to develop your own inner parent, to develop your own inner revolutionary. Because one can see veterans from the 1960s just unable to really navigate some blatant primary cultural, political, social issues of our day. It's really difficult to be loyal to the revolutionary ideologies and martyrs and ancestors and to apply that with courage and fearlessness today. Anyway, just wanted to share a few things like that, and hopefully that's of some use and would help some people reflect in a positive direction in their lives. Solidarity and love.